Okay, next, as I mentioned, capturing a system image. So a system image can be captured locally or remotely using special software or devices. All right, there are applications that can do it via software. There are also other applications or devices that can do it, through a hardware connectivity or hardware connectivity rather. So it will basically write block the computer or the device in question. So when I say write block, I mean you're not able to write to that disk at all. Much like a read-only, but better. So that way, even if it's read-only, there are still some things that could be accessed just by the nature of you interacting with the file system. When you write block the computer, you literally turn off its ability to write at all. So that way, you can image that disk. You can create a forensic image, a bit level, bit by bit image of that disk. Even the slack space that's on the drive is then copied to a duplicate. When you're done, you would run a hash, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. And if the hashes match up, you know it is an exact duplicate of the suspect device or the suspect file, folder, disk, what have you. Okay, so there are live USB or CD, DVDs, whatever, what have you, whatever your method of or your media of choice is. And when I say live, what I mean is that these are basically ISO images that are on a USB or a CD or a DVD. That computer will boot up, but it boots up completely off of the USB drive or the CD. Nothing's written on the hard disk, as I mentioned. And there are a number of devices out there. Kali Linux, I mentioned in a previous video, that's one, but there are literally dozens of different distributions and programs from Encase, Access Data, etc., etc. There's lots of them out there that can give you these live bootable images that can give you forensic capabilities on a target PC, laptop, etc. All right, and again, here I have just an example of another piece of hardware that can basically make a forensic copy of it. Okay, now something else to keep in mind when talking about capturing a system image is to make multiple copies of the imaged data. And the reason for that is that we want to make sure we have a copy that we're working off of, never the original data. We don't want to work on the original image or the original PC or laptop or what have you, simply because, as we mentioned before, that will contaminate the data. So we make multiple copies. That way we can work off of a copy if something goes wrong or we need to in some way destroy it or go through some type of destructive analysis. We can always go back and start with a new or a fresh imaged copy the next time we have to do something again. So that way we're always working off of a copy that we can verify via that hashing algorithm. We can verify it is an exact duplicate of the original. And we never want to use the actual target hard drive, as I already mentioned, simply because it contaminates the data. So forensic software will log and timestamp every action that we take during the investigation, so that way we can build what's called a case folder to aid in the documentation and the reporting. Because again, if we're simply trying to determine what happened, if it's a breach, if it's someone's trying to hack into our system, we may never have any desire to take this to court, or we know it's not going to go anywhere from a legal standpoint, but we want to understand what happened, how we can harden our defenses. So in that case, it's not as important. But if we're talking about a criminal case where we think, or there has the potential for that case to go to court at some point in time, it is crucial that we maintain proper evidentiary procedures, all right, and making sure we maintain chain of custody and so forth, which we'll talk about also in a few minutes. But having that documentation, again, is critical because it's very important. If it ever goes to court, we want to make sure that we can recall that testimony and make sure that we can understand very systematically what we did, because it may be 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road before that actually goes to court. And if we're not aware of what we did, if we don't have a photographic memory, that documentation is going to be extremely important.